Hi, welcome to the Joe Mel Show. I'm Joe.
I'm Melissa.
And this is a podcast where we discuss life, marriage, and parenting from a Christian perspective. And it is our anniversary week, isn't it, Mel?
It is.
We celebrated 8 years a couple of days ago, and we went paddleboarding together all day. That was a lot of fun. And so for this episode, we thought it'd be fun just to reflect on 8 years of marriage and what we've learned over those 8 years. Obviously, there's listeners out there who've been married much longer than we have, who have all sorts of great things to say. But I believe you can learn something no matter how long you've been married, whether it's 8 days or 8 years or 80 years. So we're just going to talk about some things that we've learned, some things that we've been taught, some things that we've learned through our experiences. And to start us off, Mel, why don't you share with us what is something that you've learned over the past 8 years, 8 years of being married to me?
Well, I think probably one of the major things I've learned over 8 years of marriage is the fact that I think for me, being a stay-at-home mom, a lot of times I just get so caught up in like what is going on at home and everything that I'm doing at home and everything I'm accomplishing and I'm doing, that I forget that like some of those same frustrations that I have at home are the same frustrations that come out, like say for you in your job.
Right.
And I think that has been something I've had to realize and to continue to learn, that when you come home and maybe I'm frustrated about things, like I have to guard against allowing that to create a negative atmosphere for you to come home to, so then you feel constantly like on guard, or you feel like you cannot share with me maybe some frustrations that you are going to. I feel like it's a lot easier for me to share frustrations that I have going on at home than maybe it would be for you to share frustrations about work or just other things that you're going through. And I think something that you told me once, it wasn't last year, but maybe the year before, you had told me that you had one of the hardest years at school, and you felt like you couldn't share that with me because I had just been so frustrated at home. And that hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, like I've been creating this atmosphere to where my husband can't come home and share some things that are frustrating to him. And so I think that has been a lesson for me as a wife. And I mean, that's like 5-6 years in, realizing that there's going to be some times where I need to allow our home to be like a neutral area, to where it can be a peaceful area for you to come home. And that it might look different for other marriages, because a wife, sometimes of course there's wives that work outside the home, and so they want to come home and maybe share frustrations about work. And I think that's we want to be prioritizing each other and trying to meet each other's needs. It's like that verse in Philippians that talks about, think about not about your own interests, but the interests of others.
Yeah, I think it's in Philippians 2. I don't have my Bible open, but I'm pretty sure it's where it's
So I think in marriage, you have to realize that, it's a constant, like, being selfless. It's constantly denying yourself and thinking, okay, how can I help my spouse? How can I, I can tell he or she is frustrated. What can I do to help in that area? So that, I would say, that is number one thing I've had to learn over these 8 years of marriage.
Yeah.
And I'm still working on it.
Sure.
I'm still growing.
Yeah. I mean, we all, it's, as you're married, you have to learn where certain places are in your life. For example, some people may have like a getaway zone. Some people may go play a sport, or they may, have a place they can go and talk about their feelings and things. And, I think what you were just describing is you felt like home was your place of work, and you had frustrations and you're dealing with all that from the day. And I was trying to view home as like a place to relax and unwind. And there was like a conflict there because we weren't seeing things the same way. We didn't feel like we were in the same place together, maybe emotionally or through communication.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important to, as a couple, to find a place and communicate those. Hi, buddy. Communicate with each other about, hey, this is a time where we're going to set apart time to talk and to communicate, to express how our days went, what worked well, what didn't work well. And, for us, most of the time, by the way, we're outside, so if you hear kids coming running around or if you hear insects and bugs, it's just part of life. We have kids running around right now. So let's go put some shoes on. Thank you.
Thank you, bud.
So I think having that openness and being able to communicate, hey, like you said, I'm feeling, if you're feeling frustrated, have an open avenue to talk about that, but also be mindful, like, at the same time, I know I don't want to come in and just make things worse. Right. So if
I understand that.
If your spouse is frustrated and flustered, it's probably not the great time to say, well, listen to how bad my day's been. You don't
have a one-up game.
Yeah, you don't want to have a one-up competition with your spouse about how awful your day was. No one wins, right? That's like bragging about. People do that all the time. They brag about their injuries. Someone says, oh, I got a splinter. Someone else says, oh, man, I broke my finger. Someone else says, oh, man, I broke my arm. Oh, man. Someone else says, I lost my foot in a train accident. I don't know. It's just constant. Maybe it's a pride thing. But, yeah, like you said, selflessness is super important.
Yes.
So one lesson I've learned, I learned a lot over the last 8 years. But one thing that I've begun to realize is just how important it is to value time together and really stop trying to impress your spouse and really try to grow with your spouse, grow in your relationship. What I mean by that is when you're dating, even when you're engaged, you feel this pressure to impress them. You want to impress your significant other. You can do that by being extra thoughtful and being creative and buying them gifts and trying to like advertise yourself as like, hey, I'm marryable. Like you want to marry me. I'm a good person to marry. And I think as your relationship develops, especially after you get married, you've already decided like, hey, we are married. We're going to stick together for the rest of our life. And so what I've learned is I need to start shifting my thought process from I need to impress Melissa and be this hunk of a guy that's going to, attract her, and really start thinking, how am I going to build and nurture Melissa? How am I going to build a relationship with her and help her grow in her gifts, talents? And now that we're parents, a lot of that comes in as, how can I support Melissa in the day-to-day tasks and the rearing of our children? I mean, those are things that are now more important, right? So as a married person, I can focus less. Obviously, I want to continue pursuing you as a romantic partner and still do those things to be romantic. But a lot of times, it's just spending time with you that's more important than buying you all these gifts. Because if I bought you a gift, but then never took time to spend quality time with you, the gift would seem really shallow and it wouldn't mean much.
Right, like you're just trying to cover things up or patch something up.
Yeah, it's like that old adage, I've had people say this to me before, and buying flowers at Walmart, someone always says, oh, what did you do? Or you must be in trouble if it's not like Valentine's Day or something. And that's just an old mentality that says I'm trying to Band-Aid a weak spot in our marriage with a gift. And gifts are good, especially if your spouse has a strong love language of gifts. But really, what I've learned is trying to discover what the needs are in the relationship, what your spouse is needing, and try to meet those needs. Because they may not need a gift. Sometimes they do, but they may need something else, like help with chores or help with the kids or just someone quality to talk to and to share their thoughts and emotions with.
Yeah, and something that you shared with me, I don't know, a few years into marriage, maybe the first year of marriage, I don't remember, but mostly at the beginning. And you just told me it was something that you had learned in the internship in one of the men's classes, and how something that really struck you was when the responsibility of like the home and everything that happened with the home was placed on the husband, and the wife was helping you,
right,
and assisting you. It's going back to scripture.
Yeah, I'll clarify that real quick. So what I was referring to is the idea that when Adam was given Eve into his life by God didn't say, hey, here's your 50-50 partner, or here's your leader. He said, here's your helpmate. Here's someone that's going to help you, after Adam had already received all the responsibilities in the garden. So yeah, I was taught that sort of mentality you can take that to the home and say, hey, everything that happens in the house is my responsibility. The dishes, the clothes, all the financial situations. Obviously, when you get married, you share that, but ultimately, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, and that really struck me because I think it just kind of gave me just a better perspective of, like, I'm a helpmate to you, and we share the responsibility. So if there was ever a time I felt like, maybe I needed more help with different things, it's okay to just come and talk to you.
That's nice. Thank you.
About those things.
Yeah.
And just share that, because I think that's,
as opposed to what was, if you didn't feel that way, what would the temptation be to do?
It would be that all of this is my responsibility, especially as a stay-at-home mom. I do there have been times where I felt like, oh, this is all my responsibility, but because I knew your perspective, I'm like, no, Joe doesn't see it that way, and we can talk about it, and you've been really good about asking me, like, what can I help you with? Like, what would be most helpful for you? Like, taking the kids outside so you can get a couple things done, or do you want to go outside with the kids and I'll do these things? And that's super helpful for me, because then it gives me options. Because sometimes I can't decide, and I don't know, like, what would be best. And so that, I think that has really helped our marriage. Just realizing that it's not just 50-50. It's we're both 100% in. And we have to both be putting 100% towards each other. And that's where unity is, and that's where we can create a peaceful home, one that is a unified front.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of one of those disorders? I'm not sure. I'm getting into the medical world, so I'm going to mess things up. So forgive me, listeners. You're probably smarter than I am on these things. But I've heard of medical problems where your brain isn't communicating within each of the different lobes. Like, there's not clear communications on the neurons. Have you heard of something like that before?
Yeah.
I think after people have strokes or they have traumatic brain injuries, it takes a while for those pathways to rebuild and for good communication to happen. I kind of think as a couple, it can be easy sometimes. I think the temptation is to isolate our responsibilities and our thoughts and say, this is my world, this is my responsibility. You could do it even out of a good heart, just like you were saying. If you feel like, hey, it's my job to do this, I'm not going to ask for help, I'm not going to, bother my spouse with these things, and leave them out of that world. In a sense, you're kind of like a brain that's trying to do two things at once but not communicating with one another. And I think it seems like both of our tips and things that we've shared today, they all focus on communication.
Yes.
Being open to communication,
Yes.
being willing to communicate, being willing to ask the hard questions and answer tough questions. And that's another thing that I want to touch on is if you're not communicating with your spouse, if there's something that you cannot talk about with your spouse, that's an area you need to grow in. Like, that's where the hurt is, that's where the weakness is, and you need to bring up those things. I know in our marriage there's been times where, especially earlier on, where we'd be frustrated at one another and neither of us would be willing to talk, or one of us would be, the other one wouldn't be. And the Bible says don't go to bed or don't go to sleep. How does that verse go?
Yeah. Don't let the sun go down on your wrath.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. And as a married couple, that is so important. I know our pre-marriage counselors talked about that a lot. Just to don't go to bed mad. Like, stay up and fight if you need to, but stay up and agree to disagree, come to a compromise so that you can go to bed and be at peace. And I think that's incredibly important as a couple. And obviously, everyone's still working on that. There's no perfect communicator out there. There's no perfect couple that has figured it out completely. There's certainly some good examples out there that hopefully you're watching and paying attention to. But that's something I want to be better at and continue to grow in, because I feel like when we communicate, it brings peace and it brings clarity, even if we're not sure. Like, when we talk about things that we're not sure about sometimes, with our future, or, we talk, since we have children, a lot of our conversations in the future revolve around what we're doing with our kids, how things are going to go with that. And it's okay, but it's okay to not know the answers, but it feels good to to be together in agreement on it. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. Something I've been kind of dwelling on is the difference between like a peacemaker and a peacekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
And
What's the difference?
well, the difference that I see is that a peacekeeper, especially in a marriage relationship, if we want to keep the peace, we don't talk about conflict.
Right.
And we don't talk
avoid
about
it.
Yeah, we avoid conflict at all costs. Like, well, we don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to touch on subjects that are taboo or anything like that.
Is that kind of like sweeping dirt
Yeah,
underneath
just like
the rug? or
exactly. Sweeping dirt under the rug and just kind of ignoring
Putting a tablecloth on the dirty
things.
table?
So we have like this fake sense of peace.
Okay.
But a peacemaker is going to confront in love and bring up subjects in love. It's going back to the word, speaking the truth in love. And, kind of having those hard topics come up, those hard subjects come up, and just talking through them in a peaceful way. Really, I was just listening to a conversation with the Bevere's, and that's John and Lisa Bevere, and then they have one of their sons and his wife on podcast episodes, and it's really good. And they were actually just talking about conflict, so that's why it's kind of fresh in my brain. And they were just sharing about how you just have this false sense of peace whenever you just kind of avoid certain things. But if you want true peace in your home, you're going to have those hard conversations and talk about things, and then, then it's done. At least there's clarity, and and you can move forward with your spouse. I mean, they were specifically talking about marriage, but I felt like it could apply to, any type of relationship. But anyway, I think it's just important in marriage to not just keep the peace. Maybe there is moments like until you can maybe go back to your house or something like that.
Right, yeah.
And not,
Maybe not at Walmart.
Exactly, not in front of everybody, There's
when you're at your in-laws' house,
have some
maybe.
tact, But then in the word it says, blessed are the peacemakers,
Right.
not the peacekeepers. Jesus wasn't afraid to confront and to call things out. But he always did it respectfully and in love, not in a, critiquing type manner that would be condescending.
Yeah. Yeah, so. Jesus had a way of really speaking the truth and not caring what people thought. Even his closest disciples, they said really great things. Like Peter said, you are Christ, the Son of the living God. And then a few sentences later, Jesus calls him the devil. Says, get thee behind me, Satan. You don't know what you're a tool of the devil right now, telling him that he can't go to the cross and things. But yeah, Jesus had a way of making peace and just telling the truth. I think that's really important. And really, as a couple, if you do have areas, again, that you can't talk about or that frustrate you, that's where you need to maybe bring in extra help. Maybe it's to the point where if you can't talk about money with your spouse because you both get upset, or you can't talk about how to raise your kids, that's a great opportunity to call your pastor and say, hey, can you just be here with us while we talk? Can you talk to a counselor or a couple, someone outside your family that you trust that's going to be neutral, and just say, hey, we have a hard time talking about this, but if you're in the room with us, we will, and you can help us navigate that. That'd be some suggestions and guidance if there's certain things that you purposely avoid because it's going to cause strife.
Yeah, I remember learning about that and being told, find someone that you both mutually respect that could, be impartial. That's why you don't go to family. That's something else that we've learned in pre-marriage counseling and, and also other marriage conferences and such. Don't bring your family into your marriage conflicts.
Yeah.
Because it just, I think something that I heard was just that when you bring in family into your marriage and the different conflicts that arise, you and your spouse may move forward. Say I would go to my sister and I would just tell her all these things about you and just, just get her on my side, essentially. Well, then, we work things out and we move forward.
The
right?
husband and wife.
Yeah, the husband and wife.
Okay.
But then she's still stuck in the conflict.
Yeah.
She just remembers the conflict.
That's true.
And so now she has a skewed view of you. And so that's
Mad at me
always,
forever.
yeah, that's always really stuck with me, honestly. Like whenever I can feel tempted to complain
Mm-hmm.
to, probably just be my mom and my sisters.
Yeah.
I don't, because I think, what are they going to think about after this? What is going to be their perception, or even a friend,
Mm-hmm.
Complaining about things. It's not wise.
That's a great point. I think even beyond your family, like if you have, let's say I had a best friend, Silas almost fell out of the tree. Silas, be careful, okay? Yeah. Also, stop ripping leaves and flowers off the tree, okay? You're hurting the tree when you do that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Don't rip any more stuff off. Okay, thank you.
Why don't you get down, buddy?
I put the flowers.
Take a little break. Maybe your arms are getting tired.
Mommy, I put the flowers.
Oh, thank you.
Those are nice flowers, Naomi. Be careful who you talk to about your spouse, period.
Yes.
Really, if you're not, you do not want to damage your spouse's reputation. You may feel like you have a close confidant that's not your spouse, like you said, your sister, who's your best friend. Someone else may have a best friend or a really close family member. You want to be really careful what you say about your spouse, because like you said, you do not want to damage their reputation. Right? Just because you're married to someone doesn't mean you have the right to talk about them behind their back. Like you do. You don't have the right to do that to anybody. You should never talk about somebody if you would be embarrassed if they were there with you. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to guard that relationship, because really your spouse is your best friend. Your spouse is part of you. If you're complaining about your spouse, you're complaining about yourself. That's your marriage. That's the other part of you that God gave you. So I really like what you said. You don't want to skew someone's opinion of your spouse by letting them know issues are going on, and then maybe working them out and not letting that person know. That's why good counselors follow up. That's why pastors will follow up with you and say, "Hey, how's it going?" And it's important to share the good things. If you have someone that you trust, that you've invited in to mediate with you, like keep them in the know so they can continue to pray for you and celebrate with you as things get resolved. Because that's the ultimate goal, is to be one, right? To be one in body and spirit, soul.
To reflect Christ.
Yeah, the way Christ loved the church.
Another thing, it kind of goes along with what I just shared. But it's just, praise your spouse in person and in front of other people. Don't say negative things about your spouse in front of people. And I know I've experienced this several times with other wives that only talk about the negative things, and it's always kind of in this sarcastic way and certain stuff. And it's always super uncomfortable.
Right.
Because for one, because of this teaching that that we've grown up with, that we have heard from our premarital counselors, only praise your spouse in public. Don't complain about them or, kind of throw them under the bus. And so I think that's something we have to be mindful of as well. More so than just, sharing in it, with a confidant about maybe something that's going on between you and your spouse, but even just out in public, don't never embarrass your spouse in public.
Right.
Talking down to them or anything like that. And because it's not nice. Mm-hmm. And also it's actually really uncomfortable. Other people will laugh along because, oh, no, that's funny. But it's actually really uncomfortable.
Right. What do you do when someone complains about their husband to you? What do you do? You can't even agree with them because you don't want to insult this person who's not here to defend themselves.
Yeah, I always just try to move to the next subject because it's really awkward and uncomfortable, and it's just not, it's not nice.
Yeah. Maybe next time you should say, sounds like you got some unresolved conflict.
Yeah. I guess that would be a good leading conversation into the next conversation. But yeah, don't only praise your spouse in public. Don't embarrass them, and don't talk
Beep.
Frisbee.
down
Yeah.
about them
Absolutely.
to
All
other
the time.
people. Yeah,
Yeah.
all the time.
You know, something to remember is that you married God's son or you married God's daughter.
Right.
You know, and you would not
Yeah.
want someone to talk bad about your son or your daughter.
Yeah.
So you should do the same thing with God's son.
Oh, that's
God's
true.
daughter.
I mean, yeah, I just think now I would get so defensive if someone talked negatively about our kids. Like,
Yeah.
that would make me so upset.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it should make you upset if someone, you want to come to you want to come to your spouse's aid,
Yeah.
right? Whether that's the words coming out of your mouth or maybe even someone else's mouth. Say, hey, no, you can't talk about my spouse
Mm-hmm.
in a negative way. No, you can't do that.
It's good.
Say that to yourself and to other people.
Something else I was thinking, I recalled what I was trying to think of
Okay,
earlier.
good.
As a married person, something I've learned over the years is that we need to allow our spouse to have a bad day and not expect them to be, in performance mode 24/7. I think there is some, again, when you compare dating and engagement to marriage, something that you try to do if you're engaged or you're dating is you try to put your best parts of you forward. You try to be,
Right.
if you're a woman, maybe you wear makeup a lot on your dates that you go on, so you get used to seeing them like that. Or maybe if you're a man, you make sure you shower, and if you have a dirty job, you clean up before you go and hang out with your girlfriend or your fiance. But as a married person, I think I had to learn, like, it's okay to let your guard down. It's okay to not have everything together. And I had to also learn, like, just because something's bothering you doesn't mean it's my fault, right? It doesn't mean that you need me to fix it. There's sometimes just this middle ground where it's not something I did, it's not something I can fix, but it's something I can be there with you.
Right.
You can lean on my shoulder and we can bear this burden together because something upset you or something happened during the day or you got a text or a message from somebody that you felt was hurtful. Like, those are things that I can't necessarily fix, but those are things that we can look at together. And I don't have to, I think sometimes I had this ideal, maybe being a teacher puts me in this mindset as well. Being a teacher, you're sort of a performer. Like, you perform for those certain minutes that your students are in front of you. And, you try to have this presentation style of communication, whatever. And I think I've just had to learn to be okay with things not being perfect and, maybe being a different level of honest and saying, like, hey, I'm just not having a good day. And, being able to communicate that is really helpful, but also being sympathetic and empathetic as well. I've learned that, just because I'm having a great day doesn't mean you're having a great day, and I need to come alongside you and ask, hey, what can we do to make this better? Or maybe there's nothing we can do. Maybe we should just go get milkshakes and,
Yeah.
just kind of ease into the next phase of our day. But yeah, there's a lot of growth I've had to have, maybe because I have a perfectionist mentality. It's easier for me maybe to just fake it and just be like, yeah, everything's fine. And I've had to really learn to live with a more honest and raw version of myself, and to allow you to be that as well, not expect you to live this fairy tale 1950s sitcom life, but really be, being real and being honest with one another is opens up communication, and that's kind of our goal and theme today.
Yeah, that was really good. I would say something, and you've done a really good job with that. It's definitely been helpful for me because you want to be vulnerable with your spouse. Mm-hmm. You want, that should be the person, outside of the Lord, obviously, be the person that you can be vulnerable with and share, your emotions and your feelings. And you've done that for me, where I've been able to share, some hard things I'm going through, and you don't just like fix it. You're sitting there and then you just say, hey, I'm really sorry that happened. And something that's all I really need to hear. Mm-hmm. It's just that, hey, I'm sorry that happened to you today. Hey, I'm sorry that things didn't go the way you wanted, and that I'm just like, okay,
yeah,
that's all I needed. I just needed you to okay that emotion, and then just like, let's move forward. Mm-hmm. Let's go do something fun like milkshakes,
yeah,
or something like that.
Absolutely.
So,
well, let's end with a challenge. I think there's let's both give a challenge to the audience. I know you haven't had time to think of one, but I got one. I want to challenge our listeners, if you are married, to communicate with your spouse when you can have these quality conversations. I know for us, we typically talk after putting our kids to bed.
Yes.
It can sometimes get late, but it's good to have that time where you can say, hey, can you stop reading for a second, or can you maybe pause the dishes, let's talk about this thing that happened, or this situation that's going on, or I just need to get something off my chest. Like, that's a time for us. I want to challenge you to communicate that with your spouse so that you have a designated time just for the two of you to talk through what's going on, and give each other the permission to be honest and vulnerable, and be a good listener. Be able to put the phone down, be able to put your eyes and attention onto your spouse. But just decide, when is that going to happen? Pick a time that can be consistent, and do it. Make time to have those conversations. Don't let yourself go day after day after day after day after day thinking, oh, I need to talk to my spouse about this, and never get it done. Really make a target. It's like, we're going to talk here about these things that are happening.
That's good. That's a good challenge. I think for my challenge...
Bye. Boo, boo, boo.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Israel.
Something that I would like to challenge our listeners to do is to find an activity that you can do with your spouse that you really enjoy.
That's a great idea.
Now, we just recently went paddleboarding,
Yeah.
and I'm really thankful that we found something that we both like to do together, because that can be hard. We are interested in a lot of the same things, but there's a lot of things we're not interested in together. One of those being, you love being outside the majority of the time. I am more of an inside dweller. I do like going outside for sure, but I tend to be more of an inside person. So us finding that activity to do outside that we both enjoy together was sort of life-changing for us. So I would challenge our listeners to find something that, it would be fun to try. Like, maybe you have a couple designated date nights where you can discover an activity you can do together. Maybe outside, movies are fine, they're good. We watch movies together every once in a while. And so I don't want to say, oh, that doesn't count. I mean, but just try to find something else.
Try to find
outside of
something that opens up opportunities to talk, and that you can...
Right.
Because, watching a movie with somebody is not necessarily quality time unless there's a lot of time before and after, and you can chat about it. I mean, you can make it work, like you said, but intrinsically, movies require your attention. And that sort of necessitates you focusing on something else. So that's a great challenge. So find something that you enjoy doing with your spouse that you can do together, and find a time in your schedule that you can talk about about things together, big and small, and not let those issues linger longer than they need to, but be a communicative person and take initiative and be willing to communicate.
Yeah.
It's good.
I agree.
Thanks for being married to me for 8 years.
Thank you for being married to me for 8 years.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Here's to many more.
Many, many more. So thank you for listening. Be sure to share us with somebody, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.